announcer Thomas Triber. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. Alex Ramos, Jackie Richardson, sorry about that. You can go to Facebook and find the Retired Boxers Foundation. I'm your host for the show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I am very excited to talk boxing with you guys, of course, so let's get it going.
All right, and of course, our other co-host is a lawyer from the great state of West Virginia, who hopefully will do some Mountaineer shows this year. He kind of dropped the ball on that last year, but help me welcome to the show, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Good to be here, Mike, and I'm always ready to talk about boxing, talk about the Mountaineers, talk about West Virginia, talk about New Jersey. Just wind me up on those subjects.
We got to talk about the show in New Jersey. Top Rank is putting on another scintillating card. Jason Sosa is fighting Reynaldo Blanco. That is an 8-round fight for Jason Sosa. Shakur Stevenson will fight Carlos Ruiz. And Jesse Hart will fight Mike Gaverninski. And then we've got Bryant Jennings against Alexander. We all know I'm not going to say this right. So he's fighting Alexander, a big old heavyweight. He's a white guy. Since you wanted to talk about it, John, have at it.
Well, Jennings is fighting Alexander Dmitrienko.
Yeah,
who's lost to anybody good he's ever fought. So that's it's not a real competitive card, and as anybody who listens to the show regularly knows, I criticize Top Rank regularly for the bad cards they put on ESPN, sort of missing opportunities for national exposure. But I got to admit, I got suckered a little bit by this card. It's not competitive, but just in the sense that it's in Atlantic City. My home state is New Jersey. I'm still there regularly, as well as West Virginia. And there's a Philly-Jersey theme with the card. And, with the East Coast boxing history, New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, of course, the West Coast and Las Vegas also has a big history. You had the Kovalev fight back in Atlantic City with Alvarez recently, did well. I think it's good to see boxing back in Atlantic City. I kind of like this regional theme. In terms of actual competition, may not be that good, but I do think Jason Sosa has always provided the fans with good workmanlike efforts and action. I hate to see him on a lower part of the card.
He shouldn't be an 8-round fight, though.
No, and he's from Camden, New Jersey. He's provided good efforts. He was dominated, but did the best he could against Lomachenko. Thought he got really, I don't know if I want to, that was pretty close to a robbery. I thought the quote-unquote loss to Gamboa. He picked up some good wins against, stopped Fortuna, and also had another win against a fighter from the UK. So he's provided, the fans all seem to enjoy watching him fight. He's provided good action. I think on national TV you could use him more. Shakur Stevenson, he's from Newark, New Jersey. He's in against Carlos Ruiz, a guy we don't know. And Jesse Hart, from Philadelphia, father Cyclone Hart. He's fighting this guy, Gavronsky, who nobody knows. But a fight that I initially wasn't crazy about, but the more I think about what Top Rank has been showing, and since Jesse Hart actually is a good fighter, if they want to lead us into a rematch between Jesse Hart and Gilberto Ramirez on ESPN in the near future, we could probably do worse with what Top Rank shows us at this point. Bryant Jennings, he should be able to beat Dmitrienko, but Bryant Jennings not a big puncher for a heavyweight. I guess the question would be, could he maybe turn it up a notch and get a stoppage? Probably not.
All right, Jeremiah, any comments on this card?
No, I don't have too much to say. John pretty much summed it up. There's not a whole lot of competition here. Jennings, I assume they're just Jason Sosa, they're probably just giving him a softer touch. A guy he's not that bad, actually. He should provide a little something, a few rounds. He's only been stopped in one of his 4 losses. But Sosa's been in so tough lately that, again, they're just giving him a soft touch. But really, the victors are pretty clear here. Jennings should win clearly. Sosa should win clearly. Stevenson will continue his upward ascent. Not a whole lot here, but like John said, it's better than some of the stuff that they've given us.
All right, next up, we go to Belfast, Northern Ireland. We got a card headlined by Carl Frampton versus Luke Jackson. When I look at this, Jeremiah, Luke Jackson's last fight was against Surachet Tongmala, who was 7-8. He did KO him. Before that, this guy I don't think belongs in the ring with Carl Frampton. Am I missing something here?
No, I don't think so. It's whenever you get these goofy alphabet soup rankings, this is the kind of stuff that you get time and time again. It's not that Luke Jackson is a bad fighter. He was a 2012 Olympian. He's a good counterpuncher. He's pretty sharp. He's pretty quick. And he's got a nice backstory that you can actually read about on The Grueling Truth. One of the staff writers, Anthony Cox, did a nice interview with him. But it's one of those things that, looking at Carl Frampton and seeing the competition that he's been in with, Leo Santa Cruz a couple times, Nonito Donaire, et cetera, the guy is just clearly a notch above. And whenever you see, we've talked about it on this show a number of times, whenever you see a world-class fighter like this, like Frampton undoubtedly is, against a soft puncher like Jackson, it's almost clear-cut who is going to earn the win there. Jackson just doesn't have the kind of power to keep Frampton off of him. And really, my hope is that Carl Frampton can win convincingly because he's been spotty in his performances lately. I just hope that he wins convincingly, and you get enough hype for him to fight Leo Santa Cruz in the rubber match. I'd appreciate that. Or, of course, they could throw him in with a PBC guy. Gary Russell Jr. would do. Either one of those fights, I think, is acceptable to the fans. I'm just hoping that we get something bigger and better from here. Jackson's just he's rated highly by the WBO, but we know how that goes.
Yeah, and I would assume, John, that we're all going to agree on this one.
Yeah, Luke Jackson's a 33-year-old featherweight who's undefeated, but he's only got 16 fights, and the problem is his name's not Vasyl Lomachenko or Guillermo Rigondeaux at 33 years old or something, or close to it, with 16 fights. He's Luke Jackson, and this is for the WBO interim featherweight title. Carl Frampton can fight. I've liked his talent. He's proven that to me. Considering that Donaire really does not have anything left, in my judgment, Frampton's been in, like Jeremiah's kind of alluded to as well. Frampton's been in kind of soft now for his fight since the second fight with Santa Cruz where he lost. And, we need to see something else at this point. This Luke Jackson fight's a time waster. You put an alphabet belt on it, it doesn't make it smell good and nice and pretty. So I don't think we need it. Really, for Carl Frampton, he is a decent puncher for a featherweight, and he's got good hand speed. I'd like to see a knockout here. If they're going to be in with Luke Jackson, at least make a statement. This is one of those ones that I would categorize it as, a 12-round dull decision is not acceptable here. He needs to stop this guy.
Yeah, and I would. Sorry, I would just say real quick, John, we might be getting that because this is labeled as some interim title, whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is that Oscar Valdez holds the trinket that the WBO holds dearest, and hopefully, if we don't get a rubber match, we get Oscar Valdez versus Frampton, and I think we could all look forward to that one.
Yeah, I think that's a fight Frampton can win. I feel that Valdez is overvalued. I think all three of us think some of that here. I don't know if Mike does. but there's a lot of people real high on Valdez. I'm not one of them. I never
he's
have
not.
been.
He shouldn't be in anybody's pound for pound top
10. God, no.
ESPN.
I even think he gets overrated at featherweight a bit. So I think that's a winnable fight for Frampton. I don't think he wants to wait forever at this stage. He should, get Valdez now. So I think if that can be made, Frampton fights on Showtime in the U.S. for quite a while now, and he's been affiliated really with the PBC guys. I don't know if maybe with this WBO thing, if there's some alphabet arrangement where then the fight with Valdez could be made on, say, ESPN in the U.S. That we'll have to see. I would hope so. Of course, there was a Joseph Diaz-Gary Russell fight on Showtime in the U.S. recently, which was an excellent fight, and that's worthy of note because normally Diaz would have been fighting on HBO because he's with Golden Boy, and they were able to make that deal. So I'll hold out hope because I agree. I'd like to see Valdez and Frampton because I think that's a winnable fight for Frampton and be interesting fight. But I'm with you, Jeremiah. If he's going to fight Santa Cruz a third time because of the PBC and Showtime tie-in or take on Gary Russell, certainly those are very good fights. But let's see something other than Luke Jackson the next time out.
All right. So if you want to see something other than Luke Jackson, we can watch Tyson Fury against Francisco Pinata. And yeah, I'm just going to call him Pinata because that's what this is going to be. Am I wrong here, Jeremiah? If you look at Pinata, he lost his last fight, unanimous decision, to Petr Milas. But that was for the IBO International Heavyweight title. If you look back last year, he lost to Kevin Johnson by knockout. I don't think Kevin Johnson had knocked anybody out in 20 years. He lost in 2015 to Ruslan Chagayev. Unfortunately, it was in 2015, not 2008. His biggest wins, Jeremiah, are against Francois Botha and Oliver McCall, who he beat back-to-back in 2012.
Wow.
That would have been good if it would have been beating him back-to-back in 1995. Unfortunately, this was 17 years later. So I don't think this fight's... Unless Tyson Fury really has slipped. If Fury... I think the thing to see here, if Fury goes out and takes care of this guy within 4 or 5 rounds, then maybe Fury's got something left. If this is a fight that gets carried or he looks like he did against Seferi, then I think Fury's got something to worry about.
Yeah, I think if Tyson Fury has any sense about him, I mean, if he's got some self-awareness, he understands that a lot of people weren't happy with his clowning around against Seferi, the second best cruiserweight in Albania, mind you. A lot of people don't want to see that sort of stuff here. I mean, if potentially he goes out and gets aggressive and he's out boxing him clearly and letting his hands go, maybe people can deal with that or whatever. But yeah, you've got to make a statement here. You've got to show your boxing skills, and you've got to be active. If you're Tyson Fury, you've got to throw a lot of punches, not only because it appears better to the fans, but because you have to build your stamina up. Once you reach the world level, you're not just going to be able to pity pat everybody to death. And so, again, you got to give up the clown around. You got to get serious. Pinata or Pinata. Yeah, let's call him Pinata. He's just not of that skill level. I mean, he's lingered around, the top 20, top 30 for years now, but it's a good step up. I mean, we got to give Tyson Fury that. At least this guy is actually a heavyweight. So we're gradual steps here, but of course, a lot of this is going to depend on how he looks, and a lot of us are going to judge this performance going into a potential Deontay Wilder fight.
All right, John, are we missing anything here?
No, I agree with you both. I think that, if you're looking, the Fury-Zeferi thing was such a joke that Fury could probably just help himself appearance-wise if he stops Pianetta, but he's entertaining as a character, and even his fight with Klitschko, he wasn't entertaining in the ring. It wasn't a dominant performance or anything like that. Why I mention that is because the Wilder Fury fight, just with the figures involved, is interesting enough that I hate to say it, but I think on this one Fury probably just has to win. In other words, if even Pianetta is bad and he was stopped by a past his prime Kevin Johnson, and Kevin Johnson, even though he was a good fighter at one time, he didn't stop anybody in his prime, and he stopped Pianetta when he's got nothing left. So, I mean, Fury should be able to stop him, but I think this is probably one that all he's really got to do is win, and the fight with Wilder is going to be marketable enough. Fury's probably entertaining enough, and Wilder's Showtime numbers against Stavern in the second fight and Ortiz indicate to me that I hate to see it going to pay-per-view. It won't be a blockbuster, but I think it'll do okay. I don't think it'll be a bust.
Yeah,
but Fury's got to win.
I think it'll do okay either. And, yeah, Fury's going to win. I mean, come on. If he loses to Pinata, the heavyweight division's really in trouble, because then that means Pinata will probably get to fight for some kind of world title.
That means Eddie Hearn will find Pianetta's number. He'll be fighting Joshua in his next fight.
No, that means Pianetta will then fight the guy that just beat B.J. Flores or Manuel Char, and he can be a world champion too. Maybe he could fight B.J. Flores for like the 5th WBA belt.
Well, it's even scarier. He would be introduced by our good friend Thomas Triber as the lineal heavyweight champion of the world.
Ooh,
well,
yeah.
And
I'll tell
How
you
about that for a
today,
frightening thought?
I watched Thomas interview Tyson Fury, and I would like to say I think Thomas took the shots to the belly much better than Sefer did.
Yeah, no doubt about
Thomas.
that.
Thomas
Yeah,
didn't retire.
Triber-
Thomas didn't retire in his corner after he took the shots to the belly.
Now, do all three of us believe that Fury Wilder will happen November 10th or November 17th in Las Vegas?
Yeah, I was thinking a while back, I had a little brief burst of optimism about Wilder Joshua, so I feel burned, but you got to put that aside. Can't let that influence you. Yeah, this one feels real to me. I think that it was good thinking by the Warren and the Fury camp, and good thinking by Heyman and the Wilder camp, and Stephen Espinosa at Showtime. I think they won the chess game from Eddie Hearn on this one a little bit, and I think it's going to happen.
All right. I don't know if they won the chess game with Hearn, because now Hearn gets Wilder to fight Fury, which is going to make whichever one of them wins a bigger fight for Joshua, isn't it?
It might, but I think that the winner is going to command a much higher percentage with Joshua than they would have without fighting each other. So I think it's going to then depend if that fight just generates that much more money to make up for that, if that's going to pay off for Hearn, or if it's going to be a situation where he actually lost
for Wilder and Fury to generate a higher percentage, that has to be an entertaining fight that the winner people really want to see fight Joshua.
Yeah, I mean, we can be surprised. I got to say, I have faith in Wilder. I don't think that would happen. But, two guys as tall as Wilder and Fury with limbs flying all over the place, it's not out of the question that it could be a 12-round stinker.
Yeah, a 12-round stinker that, say, Fury wins like he did against Klitschko, then I think then everybody loses money.
Yeah, well, well, regardless of, if Fury ends up winning that fight, it's still going to generate huge buzz in the UK.
Yeah, but nothing here.
Yeah. Right, yeah, you're not going to get much here, so it's a lot of that's going to be focused monetarily on the other side of the ocean. But I can imagine that it would be a stinker. I mean, I'm not calling it as such, but just watching Deontay Wilder, and maybe it was a southpaw position, but watching him being tentative in the first few rounds against Luis Ortiz, and Tyson Fury being tentative against Vladimir Klitschko, who's also a big right hand puncher. I mean, I'm trying to think, how that would play out. I mean, you'd have to have Wilder. I think Wilder would have to be the one who would take the most chances, because I think Fury is the most content to to box and use his ability and, think he can counterpunch Wilder and, garner a unanimous decision. If Fury's he doesn't have the killer instinct, and it's not that he's a terrible puncher. He's just content. And, you see the way it affects guys mentally in different ways. And, you might have Wilder who's, trying to win a jabbing contest with him. And I'm not quite sure that he could do that because Fury is a bit sharper. But yeah, I could definitely see that one being boring and all of a sudden a lot of people, how it works with boxing fans is it blows with the wind. Everybody's whimsical. You have a bad performance, everybody's down on it. You have a good performance, all of a sudden the division's lively and there's stuff to look forward to. I think if you had a poor decision, a lot of people would fall back on that, and with a lot of American fans, Wilder would be this great big disappointment, and people would, his stock would certainly drop quite a bit, but. To your other question, I do think that it probably happens. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, especially with Wilder and Fury, there's not everything seems to be so concrete with those guys. But, listening to the stuff that comes out of the mouths of the promoters and the people surrounding them, it does seem like it's going to happen. And if it does, good for the sport. I mean, I'd rather see Fury Wilder than Wilder Brazil or whoever else he was going to take on.
Yeah. Agreed. The other question is Wilder's comments this week in front of Brazil, talking about his 8-year-old son's going to have to take care of a cripple the rest of his life. I know you've always supported Deontay Wilder, John, but there's really no way to cover this up, correct?
Yeah, I don't like the comments. The only thing I'll say, sort of in Wilder's defense, is that Mike Tyson made comments like this. Roberto Duran had made comments like this. I don't like them. I don't think Wilder needs them. I think actually, Mike, you and I agree on that. I don't think that when Wilder seems to, quote unquote, maybe be himself, I don't think he needs this. But he's been saying things like this. I don't think he needs it. I don't really like the comments, but where I will defend them is when people get all out of whack, and there's been fighters who are considered legends, throughout history who have talked like this, and people just put them on a pedestal as legends.
Yeah, but when Mike Tyson says it, Mike Tyson's all drugged up. He's not there anyways. Plus, the big difference there is Lennox Lewis didn't even have any kids.
Well, I look at it like when Duran knocked out, and I'm a huge Duran fan. I think he's the greatest living fighter of all time. But his mystique was part of the appeal, and just the way he conducted himself was different than anybody.
Wait a second.
Really
you think Roberto Duran was greater than Sugar Ray Leonard?
Yes. And I think that, but Duran said after he knocked out Ray Lampkin that cold, and Lampkin got taken out on a stretcher. Lampkin, he said that if he would have been in shape, Lampkin would have been in the morgue instead of the hospital. And everybody said that's Spanish, just Duran.
He said it in Spanish,
but everybody just says that's Duran. But then when Wilder says the stuff, a lot of people go crazy. Like I said, I don't like it in this day and age. We probably don't need that, but it's not the first time that these kind of comments have been made.
All right, Jeremiah, Leonard or Duran? Is Duran the greatest living fighter?
Well, I think Duran might be greater, but Leonard was better, if that makes sense.
No, it doesn't. You can explain.
It does. Well, it does.
It
but it does, because you have to distinguish between the two sometimes, because you can have somebody who's a better fighter than someone. Like I can imagine that Michael Nunn could beat Bernard Hopkins, and therefore I would regard him as a better fighter, but he's certainly not the greater fighter, because if you just take the middleweight context by itself, Hopkins obviously had the superior legacy. So if you use that for Duran or Leonard, Duran had the great, he had the greater amount of fights. He was already regarded as one of the greatest lightweights before he moved up, and then he beats Leonard, in his prime. So yeah, I think Duran's the greater fighter.
Leonard is considered one of the top 2 welterweights, I think, at least top 3 or 4. But he also moved up, and he beat Marvin Hagler, and he moved up, beat Donnie Lalonde, beat Thomas Hearns, beat Wilfred Benitez. I think he beat better fighters than what Duran beat, because it's not like the lightweight division during Duran's time was stacked with studs. I mean, Esteban de Jesus was the best fighter he fought, and he lost one of those 3 fights. He beat Kim Buchanan, who was a good fighter. When you look through there, though, there's not a lot of studs he beat at lightweight.
I think, though, that Duran, I would put Leonard as the second greatest living fighter of all time right now. I think Duran edges him out. Duran was 71-1 when he fought Leonard the first time. Then he beat Leonard. He beat a prime Leonard at Leonard's weight class. When they went toe to toe. Duran,
6 months later, though, when Duran and Leonard fought their fights, Duran quit. I love Roberto Duran too, and I have a real problem with a guy that quits, and I have a real problem with calling a guy greater than somebody who I think always showed up ready to fight and always to give their fans their money's worth. I watched Roberto Duran against Benitez, and I mean, you even go back to Esteban de Jesus when de Jesus beat him the first time. A lot of that, I think, was because Duran was uninterested. It was a non-title fight, and I don't think he knew who Esteban de Jesus was. So I have a hard time saying a guy's great when he wasn't consistently great. I mean, he lost to Kirkland Lang. And I know the only people that really think Kirkland Lang was that good are British and drink a lot of ale, as they call it over there.
Duran was already past his prime after he beat Leonard the first time. When he was 72.
I don't think so. He beat Davey Moore after that. He went the distance with Hagler. I mean, Hearns starched him. You had to fight against Robbie Sims that I thought he won. You had Iran Barkley, was 7 years after Kirkland Lang. And Iran Barkley, to me, may be his most impressive performance because I didn't see that coming. But once again, he gets a chance to fight Leonard 10 months after that and basically just mailed it in again. And I really have a hard time. I don't remember seeing Sugar Ray Leonard mail anything in. And I find a hard time believing that a guy that will quit is a greater fighter than somebody that wouldn't even consider it.
Well, he beat the guy at the guy's weight class, and when he was a lightweight, and when you're talking about fighting Iran Barkley, you're talking about him fighting as a 37-year-old middleweight when the guy turned pro at 115 pounds.
Yeah.
Duran's it's close between Duran and Leonard, but Duran, in my mind, it's clear that he's the greatest living fighter of all time. I'd put Leonard next, and it's close, but I think Duran gets that edge.
By quitting.
Duran straight out.
He quit. He straight up quit.
Duran straight out won, lineal titles in 3 original 8 weight classes, which Leonard did not do. Duran was the first challenger to go the distance with Hagler at middleweight. And again, Duran's the guy that turned pro at 115 pounds. And his prime was as a lightweight. People forget about Duran because he moved up, that Duran is really one of the greatest punchers of all time as well. But people get confused about that because they don't evaluate him with the great punchers in terms of they know he was a good puncher, but that based on what he did as a lightweight. But, when you look at his work at lightweight, he's one of the greatest punchers in boxing history.
So, at lightweight, though, from 1971 on up, there's not a lot of defenses against really good fighters. I mean, if you look at it, in 1973, his fights were against guys that were 26-9, 17-9, 3-0, 26-5. And that was after De Jesus beat him. He fought Don McClendon in 1973, who was 11-12. Followed that up against a guy that's 25-10, 25-13, 17-4, 21-14, and then in 74, for some reason he had back-to-back KO wins over a guy that was 4-0 coming in, another guy that was 2-0, and then he beat a guy that was 21-14. I mean, 1975. He had his first fight of 1975. He fought a dude that was 1-4. He did beat Lampkin. Lampkin was a really good fighter, but then after that, he beats a guy that's 24-14, a guy that's 2-2, a guy that's 0-3. And if you remember, he beats Edwin Verrouet, but Verrouet gave him a tough go.
But these guys fought all the time back then.
But this is my point. Yeah, he's 71-1. But when 20 or 25 of those fights are against guys with losing records or guys in their second or third fight, I mean, come on. Is that more impressive than what Sugar Ray Leonard did? I mean, look at the guy. I mean, Ray Leonard beat a ranked guy his first fight in Willie Fireball Rodriguez, correct? I mean, so
how many times did Sugar Ray Leonard retire, Mike? And he retire, come back.
So what does that matter? I mean, what's it matter how many times he retired and came back? I know this. When I look at his record,
says he had to fight Hagler at 12 rounds instead of 15 rounds. Couldn't be a 15-rounder.
So,
okay.
You
didn't hear Duran say, "I got to go 12 with Hagler."
I also saw Duran lose to Hagler. Willie Rodriguez, 10-1. I mean, if you look at this, there is only two fighters. Sugar Ray Leonard fought his entire career with losing records. If you look at him, when you get to like his 7th, 8th fight, he's fighting guys like Javier Muñiz, who was a good fighter. You go a little farther, before he ever wins the title, he's fighting Armando Muniz, Randy Shields, Floyd Mayweather Sr., who was a good fighter. Didn't talk as much as his son, but Adolfo Rivera-Wet, Marcus Geraldo, Tony Schiavone, Pete Ranzani, Andy Price. And I remember the Price fight. Price was ranked number 1 or 2. He was the NABF champion. And Howard Cosell on the ABC broadcast was doubting whether Leonard could win. And Leonard comes out then and he beats Benitez, stops him in the 15th round, destroys Davey Boy Green with one shot. And you talk about knockout punchers. I think that people really underrate the ability of him to knock somebody out. It makes Leonard quit, knocks out Larry Bonds, moves up to fight Ayub Kalule, moves back down, beats Tommy Hearns. And the thing about Roberto Duran or about Sugar Ray Leonard is this. Sugar Ray Leonard was one of the few men I've ever seen that was mainly a boxer. But he fights Tommy Hearns, and when he has to go get him to win the fight, he did. And when you look at his first fight against Duran, he fought Duran's fight. And that fight was basically, you could throw it on a dartboard who won that fight. That was an 8-7 fight to me either way. I wouldn't argue with anybody that said it went either way. You look at him after that, he knocked out Bruce Finch. He retired supposedly because of a little eye issue. But when you talk about the Hagler thing, outside of the Kevin Howard fight in 1984, he didn't fight for 5 years. He came in after 5 years of not fighting and fought Marvin Hagler. I don't care if he asked for it to be 12 rounds or not, because in the end, that also shows how great Leonard was, because Hagler was the man, one of the greatest middleweights of all time, one of the greatest fighters I've ever seen. And Marvin Hagler gave him what he wanted to be able to fight him so he could make some money. And after that,
most people thought that Hagler won the fight, and Hagler showed that he was near the end.
I think Hagler won that fight, but I don't think the majority of people thought Hagler won that fight. Usually, when I talk to people, it's 50-50 or close to it.
I think the majority did, but there's people that thought Leonard won the fight. There's people I respect who thought Leonard won it, but I think the majority of the people, I thought Hagler won the fight.
Well, I think this. I loved Marvin Hagler. I think Hagler won the fight, but I may have been biased. But I still think Hagler won the fight. You look at that. After that, Donnie Lalonde was a really good fighter. He's losing to Lalonde, comes back and wins. And my thing with Roberto Duran is this. He was in a lot of great fights, but how many times was he basically beaten and came back and won? Because I can find 2 or 3 times with Leonard. And I may be missing it with Duran. I may not be thinking about something. But, I mean, to me, the fights he won, he was either in the lead or they were close fights. When he was getting his ass kicked, he usually lost.
He really didn't get his ass kicked until he was past his prime, and then he was still beating guys like Jorge Castro when he was about 90 years old.
Well, I would say this. In 1980, I don't think he was way past his prime when he fought Sugar Ray Leonard. You just said that. He was in his prime. And you can't have this, 5 months before he was in his prime, but 5 months after he's not. And I mean,
well, you can't. Everybody starts to lose it. I mean, to me,
he beat Davey Moore in 1983. Yeah,
but he was not. I mean, I think anybody that watched Roberto Duran for his entire career, he was still. That's how good he was. He was still well past his prime when he was competitive with Hagler and ahead in the fight till late in the fight, and beating these other guys like Davey Moore and Barkley, and then, like I said, Jorge Castro, who he beat in a rematch after losing to him the first time when he was about 90 years old. I mean, he beat Jorge Castro in 1997.
Well, I didn't know Jorge Castro was that good. I know he was ranked, but I thought it was because he was Argentinian.
Well, I don't like to go on the alphabet stuff, but he was an alphabet belt holder.
Yeah, but do you really consider Jorge Castro a world champion?
Not really, but
okay, I wrestle.
He was. I mean, he was a legitimate. He was a legitimate. He was a legitimate top
all I got
contender.
is this: the second time that he fought Sugar Ray Leonard, he was 29 years old. John, I don't think we can say he was past his prime. Well, in 1983, he was 33. So, same after the Hagler fight, I can take that, and then his greatness is what got him through things. But I mean, really, he was 29 years old, John. We can't really say he was over the hill.
Well, and Mike, Jorge Castro did beat Reggie Johnson before he lost to Roberto Duran.
Good for Jorge Castro. All right.
He also stopped John David Jackson.
Yeah, but John David Jackson got stopped by everybody that he thought that was good, didn't he?
Stop your excuses, Mike.
How's that an excuse?
Castro was a good fighter. You don't beat.
He was all right.
You don't beat.
Castro was over the hill when they fought.
Well, come on, but I know. But Reggie Johnson was a damn good fighter, as was John David Jackson. Those are quality wins. I mean, it's a rock solid win. My only point of contention is Roberto. See, I think people need to understand more that if you move up from your original weight class, like as soon as Duran went past 135, he was no longer at his best.
Right. He wasn't. I mean, the farthest you could take it was that everything he had left came into the first Leonard fight, and it was a close fight, as Mike said, but
all right.
He squeaked.
I'm just going off of this.
Really
when I look at who he beat, when you give me the 71-1, I just don't buy it, because most of these guys, as Greg Haugen, our friend who's been on before, would say, most of them were Panamanian taxi card drivers. How about that?
I will.
There's not a lot there.
Yeah, I'll agree to the point that I do think Duran's resume. It's funny because as much as I like Duran and I really appreciate his style and it's lovely to watch, people do get ahead of themselves, and what happens for a lot of these people is they start to romanticize the era a little bit, and all of a sudden, Esteban de Jesus, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Ken Buchanan was a great fighter, and he was I'm not sure I would class him.
Good at best.
Exactly. Well, but the thing is, a lot of people who say these things, I've noticed that a lot of people don't watch, the career from front to back. I mean, did you see all the other fights against Lampkin and Mike? I know you've seen a lot of this stuff, but
see, that's the problem, though. There's a ton of fights here. There's no video of. I can't pull up a video of Jose Vasquez in 1974 against Roberto Duran. It's just not there because nobody even filmed it.
But my problem is more that people don't actually watch them. They'll catch the big fights, but they won't go through the from top to back. They don't go through them all, so they don't see everything, and therefore they don't have all the context. Guys like Edwin Virowit and Lampkin and these other guys, they're good fighters, but you get fighters like that in every era. There wasn't anything special about those guys in particular. So it's not as if Roberto Duran was knocking off, a killer's row. This isn't, Benny Leonard, who was fighting, 7 Hall of Famers and whatnot. This is a guy who was fighting 1 Hall of Famer and Esteban de Jesus, who is really good at his best, and, some other guys who are ranked.
Yeah, and he did lose to him once.
Exactly. I will say that in regards to Esteban de Jesus, my Puerto Rican buddy, Wilfredo Moran, he said, and so have some other Puerto Ricans, that Esteban de Jesus was looked at his peak by Puerto Ricans as being better than Carlos Ortiz, but he was a guy who couldn't maintain that, therefore he fell short.
Well, and Ortiz is a guy that I don't know why Duran didn't fight after he won the title either.
Yeah, I'd have to look at Ortiz's a little bit more, but I know, I think Ortiz was faded by that point, because I remember he ended his career by getting stopped by Ken Buchanan.
Come on, fighting Lupe Ramirez after beating Ken Buchanan, who was 15-12. You can't tell me Carlos Ortiz doesn't deserve the shot before Lupe Ramirez. And the fact is this,
again, you might be right.
At this, if he fought 6 times in a year, usually 4 of them were non-title fights against guys me, you, and Jeremiah could beat.
Well, these guys just stayed more active then, though. It wasn't a bad thing. I think
Wait a second, it is a bad thing because we just got done talking about a top-ranked card. Every week we talk about the top-ranked card where you bitch about this.
Yeah, but this is because
these guys aren't active today. Duran wasn't ducking anybody. He's just fighting a lot of times a year. A lot of times he's fighting back in Panama City just to give the fans something to see. And I'm somebody who thinks that Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. is actually a bit underrated, but I actually don't criticize Chavez Sr. like some people do about that he was padding his record. He was taking non-title fights back in Mexico just so to see him, and he was staying active.
I think he was padding his pocketbook with easy fights.
And I just think that these guys stayed a lot more active, and then they had plenty of big fights too. And nowadays, the criticism is you don't have the big fights, and you don't have the guys staying active, and you've got them fighting the type of guys that Chavez and Duran were fighting just to give the fans something to see while they were staying busy in between their bigger fights.
Yeah, right.
I don't buy that, though. When I look at this, there's years here where there's nobody legit that he fights for the entire year. I don't
know about that.
Well,
yeah,
one at most, because if you go through his record and look at it, he beats Buchanan in 72. 73, you got Hector Thompson. That's the best fighter he fought. He was a solid fighter. He fought like 8 other times in non-title fights. You go to 74, he fought the rematch with De Jesus. Outside of that, though, there's nothing else. And he fought another 8 times. You get to 1975, he beats Ray Lampkin. He beats Edwin Verrouet and Leonicio Ortiz. To me, that's his best year because that's 3 solid guys. 1976, he fought 4 times. Lou Bizarro was his toughest opponent. He fought Saul Mambi, but I still don't buy that Saul Mambi was that good. 1977, Javier Muniz, Villamar Fernandez. 78, you get Verrouet again, De Jesus, and then he moves up. I just don't see a lot of quality wins there. And to me, Sugar Ray Leonard was fighting, especially late 70s coming up, he was fighting 5 or 6 times a year, and he was fighting 2 or 3 contenders at least during that time, if not more, especially when you get to 79.
But these guys Duran was fighting, were the lightweight contenders of that era. Just like when Leonard was fighting guys who were the welterweight contenders of that era, like Randy Shields.
You
these guys were
Randy Shields. There's nobody during Leonard's run as the champion that he fought that was 1-3.
No, he fought guys like Davey Boy Green and Bruce Finch.
Wait a second.
And he wasn't as active as Duran was.
Are you saying Davey Boy Green is the equivalent of a 1-3 fighter?
No, I'm not saying he's the equivalent of a 1-3 fighter, but I'm just saying he's probably not even quite the equivalent of the lightweight contender Duran was fighting. But, I'm not really
Davey Boy
criticizing
Green,
Leonard.
I think, was pretty damn good. I watched him fight Carlos Palomino, and that was an absolute war until Palomino stopped him in the 11th round.
But I'm not really critical of Leonard's record or resume. I mean, I think he's the second greatest living fighter.
Yeah, but now
of all
our problem
time.
is this, John. You've made fun of Davey Boy Green, and now you've gone too far.
Now you've pissed him off.
I actually feel sorry for Davey Boy Green because we've just seen that highlight reel of Leonard catching him with the left hook.
Oh, my God. That
was
leave
him out before he hits the canvas.
One of the greatest one-punch knockouts I've ever seen, and people don't even realize it happened.
See, that fight is
they
the
don't watch the
epitome
fights.
of why the Brits today often get so excited about a lot of these alphabet belts and picking up these alphabet belts. It's from all those years of suffering, having to watch when you try to take on the lineal welterweight champion Sugar Ray Leonard.
So now you're going to attack our English
He's out before he hits
listeners.
the canvas.
Now you're going to attack our English listeners. You're just all over the place attacking everybody, John.
I'm not attacking. I'm just saying I could sympathize. I'm actually sympathizing with them. I can see why they might feel the way they do nowadays when they get to say that we've got 14 world champions with all these alphabet belts and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing about Duran, though, that I wanted to point out, sometimes, you remember how active Mike Tyson used to be? There's one thing that I've noticed that trainers will do if they see that you get a little flabby or you want to go out drinking and party a little too hard, is they'll keep you busy intentionally just so they can keep your butt in the gym. So that might have been something to do with Roberto Duran. Obviously, part of it was probably because he didn't have the amateur background of Roberto Duran. So you get a lot of that from the guys from south of the border and on down. So there could have been a little bit to that too, where they're like, "Hey, Duran."
I think if you can fight guys that are 0-3 and 2-2 in your hometown and probably make a good amount of money, I think that's probably why you do it.
Well, and exactly that's
why
I'm
right though about some of the reasons that they would do it though is right. They didn't want to balloon up as much between fights, keep active, keep out of more trouble,
get paid.
Sometimes lack of amateur career.
Yeah, Mike, you're absolutely right.
You're fighting at home. I don't think you're doing it because you're this goodwill Samaritan. I mean, you could probably fight a guy that's 0-2 at the Gimnasio Nueva Panama in Panama City and probably make, 20, 25 grand just for chilling out and beating a guy that's 2-0. That's a lot better than actually fighting somebody.
Well, and not only that, that's the way I look at it with older fighters like Harry Greb and all these other guys is people are like, wow, they fought a lot of guys that weren't contenders. Well, why not get paid for it instead of spar? I mean, if you're essentially going to have a paid sparring match, why not do it? In fact, most guys today would probably be better off doing that sort of stuff, like beat up a Rod Salka from time to time and get paid for it.
Or Charlie.
But you got to remember another thing. You got to remember another thing too is that back then you didn't have TV accessibility like you have nowadays. You didn't have necessarily all these fights on TV, these smaller fights. When these guys were going fans, maybe in their home country or anywhere else, it was really a chance for these people because they weren't seeing them as often. So you buy a ticket and go out to actually watch them live.
All right. Once again, my whole point with all this is this. I don't see anything wrong with him doing that. He got paid that way. But I do see something wrong with saying, well, he was 71-1 and Sugar Ray Leonard only had 37 fights. Because Sugar Ray Leonard in his 37 fights didn't fight too many guys that were bums. That's my whole point. And if you go through Roberto Duran's 100 and some fights, I mean, you don't find wins against guys that Leonard beat, like Benitez, Hearns, who were both guys to beat. And I know his best division was at 135, but, he was pretty damn good at 147 because he beat Leonard that one night. But my thing is this. I think Duran was not as great a fighter as Leonard because of this. I believe Leonard could beat you in more styles than what Duran could. And I think he proved that the 3 fights they won. Because once he adjusted after the first fight and fought the fights the way he wanted, it was pretty much a whitewash the next 20 rounds that they fought.
Yeah, except that Duran beat him when he came up from lightweight. His original weight class, and he
Once
fought
again,
Leonard.
I don't know what that has to do with my point. My point is this.
The point is when it came down to it in the ring in Leonard's weight class, not Duran's weight class, Duran beat Leonard, and Duran was 29 years old.
Duran quit when he was 29 years old, and 29 is young. He quit 5 months later. Wait a second. No, hold on. If you're the greater fighter, why can't you adjust to what Sugar Ray Leonard did in the second fight? Why would you just say, screw it, I don't want to fight no more?
Because the guy wasn't motivated. The guy wasn't motivated.
Wait a second, because you're telling me that the greatest fighter that is living today lost fights because he was unmotivated. See, to me, that's why I would agree with you. He did. And that's why, to me, Sugar Ray Leonard was greater. I'll take Marvin Hagler, because those guys always showed up. Those guys would never quit. And I think it's a slap in the face to pretty much any boxer to say that the greatest boxer of all time didn't show up.
Mike, Leonard got stopped by Hector Camacho at super middleweight.
Yeah, in 1997.
Right, which is my point.
Yeah.
When past the prime stuff does not count as it's past the prime stuff. It doesn't count as much as prime stuff.
Damn. Do you not understand that 29 is prime? Now you sound like a Mike Tyson fan who thinks his prime was from 1986 to 1988.
Because you're talking about previous eras where people didn't have the longevity. The prime was earlier back then. There's no doubt about it. Especially when you had more fights.
Okay.
Especially when you had more scoring.
This sounds like a Mike Tyson argument. You know, in June of 1980, he was in his prime. But in November, he wasn't. He was 29 years old. If you're 34 or 35, 33 even, I could see that. And if you're not going to distance with Hagler 3 years later, and beating Davey Moore 3 years later at 32, I can see that. But I don't think there is any way. And if you watched the second fight against Leonard, I thought that was 4-3 or 5-2 going into the 8th round. I mean, he didn't really start getting his ass dominated until the 6th round. He couldn't deal with the speed, and when he couldn't deal with the speed, he had nothing else he could do. He had one way to beat Leonard, and that's if Leonard stood there and fought with him. Leonard stood there and fought with him the first fight to prove his manhood. And that, to me, is why I think Leonard is greater. Leonard stood there and fought him toe-to-toe.
That's just mythology. That's because Duran made him fight that way.
Pressure. Why didn't Leonard make him do it the second or third time?
That's a big mythology that Leonard wanted to prove his manhood by standing toe-to-toe.
It's a big mythology.
Duran made him fight
doesn't
because
happen.
He put pressure on him.
It doesn't happen. Yeah, I know. That's all it was. Leonard couldn't fight when you put pressure on him. That's why Tommy Hearns knocked him out in the first fight.
No, he could fight, but that's Duran put the pressure on him, was able to make him fight his fight, and that's how he beat him.
Whatever. But the second fight 5 months later, Duran was putting pressure on him. The difference was, if you could sit there and watch the first fight and tell me that you see Leonard trying to dance around, you didn't. I mean, I don't know. We've actually never had this conversation,
because he couldn't
Jeremiah.
dance. He couldn't dance around. He got hurt early in the fight, and Duran was putting the pressure on him.
All right, so it's a myth. Leonard didn't fight Duran's fight. Duran forced him to, right?
That's right.
Why didn't he 5 months later?
Because he wasn't in as good a shape as he was for the first fight. And for Duran, it's not Leonard's fault. Leonard gets all the credit for me for getting the second win. Nothing should be taken away from him.
So what about
as the great Emmanuel Stewart said, which I agree with, Duran just didn't think what Leonard was doing was a fight. Now, you can criticize Duran for that, certainly, but that's the mentality of Roberto Duran.
Well, all I know is this.
This guy, this isn't a fight.
I'll give you this. I think Pernell Whitaker would have whipped Roberto Duran's ass at lightweight.
Well, you could think it with style-wise, but...
No, I could think it just because I saw him fight.
Overall career, he doesn't have as good of a career as Roberto Duran did.
How does he not have as good a career? He was the lineal lightweight champion. He moved up to welterweight. I mean, so we were only counting what he did at lightweight, right? Nothing else matters. Because it doesn't matter that he lost twice to Leonard because that was at welterweight. Pernell Whitaker fought in a style...
He didn't lose twice to Leonard.
Huh?
Well, he lost twice. He didn't lose twice to Leonard at welterweight.
Well, no, the second time was at super middleweight, wasn't it, when he completely decided to be a pussy again and not fight? I mean, come on. He had a chance to clear his name, and he just stood there and looked at Leonard. And they were both well past their prime. I know it has no bearing on anything else other than the fact that he just stood there. He showed no fire, and all I know is this. He's supposed to be Mr. Badass. After something like that happens, wouldn't you want to come back and, clear your name? And when you look at a guy like Pernell Whitaker, I don't think Roberto Duran ever fought a lightweight as good as Azuma Nelson. And he beat Azuma Nelson.
Azuma Nelson was,
he was old.
At his best at featherweight.
Yeah. Well, Azuma Nelson was 28 years old then. I mean, I know he was shot and he was past his prime and over his weight. But I don't see, Roger Mayweather's better than most of the guys that Roberto Duran beat. And that was
I definitely wouldn't go that far.
Okay, so you think those 40 guys that Duran beat that were between 0-2 and 0-6 were better? I said the majority. I didn't say his best fights. Pernell Whitaker also beat Buddy McGirt. Buddy McGirt was a damn good fighter, and he beat him at welterweight. He beat Julio Cesar Chavez at welterweight. This is outside of his comfort zone. He beat McGirt again. It's debatable the De La Hoya fight. I actually think De La Hoya did squeak that out. But, I mean, when you look at him, if you put them in the ring together, you watch Edwin Vera-Wet, and the trouble Edwin Vera-Wet gave Duran twice, and you think he's going to beat Pernell Whitaker, I think you're nuts. And I don't think that anything that happens past their main weight from talking to you should matter in this case.
Well, again, you can argue that it would be a difficult style matchup if he and Duran were to fight, but I don't think that you can argue that Pernell Whitaker had a better career than Roberto Duran.
Yeah, but you're not talking career. You're just talking about lightweight. I mean, you started off talking about career, but then it was just lightweight.
No, I'm talking about career as to who is the greatest living fighter of all time, and I think that that's Roberto Duran, and I think that the majority of boxing historians will agree with me there, and agree with me.
I don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter to me, because I think that is absolutely asinine. Sugar Ray Leonard's the greatest fighter I've seen in my lifetime. Marvin Hagler's number 2. Neither one of them would quit. Jeremiah, you got anything to say? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just
checking.
Just listening to you two go ahead.
You just looking at the Pornhub, seeing what's up for later on when your wife falls asleep.
Yeah, I'm starting to get sweaty. I'm starting to get sweaty here.
It went from box rec to that.
Yeah, if I start panting, don't freak out, guys.
We won't. We're used to that. But, all right, how about this? What about the rumor that Floyd Mayweather you think there's anything to the Mayweather-Pacquiao 2 rumor, Jeremiah?
Yeah. I mean, I think there could be. I mean, Floyd Mayweather is an opportunist. Mayweather Pacquiao just had a good performance against Matisse. I think. In casual circles, I guess if we would call it that, but, amongst a lot of diehard Pacquiao fans, there's this feeling that, Pacquiao's still on his game enough to be, competitive and just by way of being and the fact that 147 has thinned out a little bit. Again, there's just a feeling that with Pacquiao's performance, he scored a stoppage in his first in a long time. That Floyd Mayweather probably looked at that and he sees that that people are like, oh well, this is a viable fighter. He doesn't look that washed up, and Mayweather, he sees that and he he gets the dollar signs in his eyes and they're rolling around like a vending machine, and I couldn't blame him if that's the route he wanted to pursue. And I think they even asked him about it in an interview, and he smirked. And I think people are more likely to tune into that one because Mayweather, he hasn't really fought a boxer in a long time, and coming off Pacquiao's performance, and it's a sport where what you've done for me lately is very much in people's minds. I think people would appreciate that. And I think there'd be a lot of people who would say, hey, maybe Pacquiao does have a legitimate chance this time. Mayweather is bound to fall off, with a guy who he doesn't rely solely on his reflexes, at least not as much as Roy Jones ever did. But, again, there'd be a lot of people asking themselves, like, okay, well, when does he finally hit a wall? When does it finally happen? When does he finally get that single loss on his record? And then we can stop the talk about Marciano and all these other fighters. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I really wouldn't be. I wouldn't like it, because, again, these are two washed-up guys, and all they're really doing is they're just trying to get you for your money. And I personally wouldn't play along with that, but, again, I see it, and I would understand why they would do it.
Yeah, and we were just talking about Duran Leonard 3, John.
Yeah, I know. And I agree with you that was not a great effort by Duran. But
that wasn't a great effort by Leonard either.
No, and Duran did slice him up when he finally threw one meaningful punch late in the fight, but he could have been doing that earlier. But getting to the point of Pacquiao Mayweather 2, I think if you do the numbers, there's too much to be discounted even at this point. And as Jeremiah pointed out, even looking at it objectively as a serious boxing observer, you can't say the argument that Pacquiao is still a top 5 welterweight is out of line. So the problem would be, I guess not, there'd be a lot of problems maybe where you could complain about it, but so you can't say the fight would have no significance in that sense even, but the problem you run into is, Pacquiao's got a WBA alphabet belt. So if there were to have Pacquiao Mayweather 2, you would have all kinds of Pacquiao fans and Mayweather fans screaming that it's for the welterweight championship.
They're going to make a new belt just for this fight, anyways, and it can be another world champion.
And that's the part of it that for me gets more annoying, is that people won't really kind of take it what it is, which is Pacquiao's still significant because he's holding a roughly top 5 welterweight rating, even if you look at the Transnational and the Ring, which have credibility. So if Mayweather comes back and fights him, you can't say it's completely meaningless, but then they'll hype it into the welterweight title stuff and all that kind of nonsense. It won't make anywhere near the first fight would, but I'd seen projections, even like a year ago where credible projections were saying, I've mentioned that there's people who know this stuff that think they could make half of it. So, what?
So that's $2 million,
they brought in that kind of money.
Weren't they like 3 or 4 million before?
Well, so they got what, 4.5 PPV for the first fight or more. Yeah, right. It beats everybody else, and that's where the money's still there.
And I'll tell you, the thing that makes it interesting to me, John, is just because Mayweather is a lot of a reflex guy. The last time you saw him fight against McGregor, I know that was kind of a setup and fixed, but he did just stand there. And Pacquiao's been fighting, and it's been a while since Mayweather's been in a serious fight. And I would rather see this than Devin Alexander and Andre Berto. I just wouldn't pay $50 for it.
No, and Mayweather is smart like that. He knows it too. I mean, the fact that he's not fighting and Pacquiao is, that can make a difference.
Well, yeah, and not only that. I mean, when you see that Top Rank likes to keep all their stuff in house, it's like who else would Pacquiao fight? I mean, seeing as he's also his own promoter now, would he want to offer himself up to Terrence Crawford or Vasyl Lomachenko? No, the Mayweather fight just makes too much sense.
Yeah, and he probably makes
the only other thing Pacquiao could do is take one rematch and they could sell it in Australia or something like that. I don't know. That would make more than probably some other fights he's being offered.
Yeah, but
you know
what?
Risk.
It may be tougher to fight Floyd Mayweather, but it's probably going to hurt more to fight Jeff Horn.
Oh, no, I'm sure Pacquiao would rather have the Mayweather fight.
Yeah,
and,
it's going to be more money and not as painful because Mayweather's not going to headbutt him and elbow him and all that crap. He's just going to talk a lot of shit and then stare at him. All right, we'll go ahead. We'll finish up with this one. It looks like Alexander Usyk could be fighting Usyk-Bellew. I guess at heavyweight, John. You excited about that?
I'm not really. I feel maybe I'm in the minority right now, but I feel people are getting a little carried away with Usyk at this point. Even though we might need a cruiserweight division, Usyk's a big guy, basically. The heavyweight division's not the strongest right now, but for him to get that, I see a lot of people giving him. I kind of need to see a significant heavyweight win, and then I might be. Yeah, and that includes with the pound for pound stuff. That's just my feeling. I think Bellew's resume, to be fair to him, I've looked at his record a few times lately with this in mind, and I got to be fair to Bellew. His resume is actually pretty good overall. He's got the Stevenson. Look at the rest of his resume; it's actually pretty good. But with all that said, I'd rather see the fight at heavyweight to at least get things moved along with Usyk, but I don't really see a scenario where Bellew's going to beat him.
All right, Jeremiah.
Yeah, no. Usyk is going to whip Bellew's butt. I don't think there's much doubt about that. I mean, Bellew kind of got a handout when he fought the African fighter for that, that trinket. That title was taken from Gregory Drozd, or however you say his name. It was the classic, alphabet soup organization tactic where they took it from Drozd, and then they called him champion in recess, and then they, let Bellew, who's going to be a big moneymaker, they let him fight an African for the vacant strap. I mean, typical, it's overblown. But Usyk is going to beat him. I don't think there's anybody who doubts that. But, it'll be a big payday. It doesn't bother me all that much because, again, when the heavyweight division has to sort itself out, and with Usyk previously fighting at heavyweight anyways, I don't think, the jump is going to be – I don't think it's going to be that much of an adjustment for him. But, I will say, and maybe John will give Usyk some credit for this, but one of the alphabet trinkets gave Usyk a special status, and whenever he wants, he is automatically the mandatory for Anthony Joshua. Of course, if that title changes hands, again with the heavyweight mix-up and whatnot, then of course it'll apply to a different person. But right now, Usyk has the option of becoming the mandatory for one of those belts.
John?
Well, I'd like to see him. I hate the alphabet part getting involved, but I think what was it that was talking that way. I just think, I guess what boxing is, you guys made the case for it, and maybe there's something there. You have to have somebody to fight. See him really make a serious move. I don't think there should be any doubt about it. Okay, we had this cruiserweight tournament going on, and I was looking forward to the Gassiev fight like everybody else. I found the fight disappointing. I thought Gassiev didn't perform well, and I thought Usyk, while he clearly won the fight, I thought his performance was overrated. It just had that essence of like a sparring. Looking to see fight, to see Usyk show what he's got at heavyweight. I actually
and
feel
I'll tell you, John, real quick, I'll weigh on this. I thought Usyk would look better than what he did. I also think this, I think you have to give him credit that you thought it was a 50-50 fight, and he turned it into a sparring session that he easily won. But my problem with that is this. To me, a great fighter takes that sparring session about the 7th or 8th round and says to hell with it and goes ahead and goes after the knockout. That's what guys like Hagler, Leonard, and Duran did in the past. They didn't just let a guy skate by for 12 to 15 rounds.
Yeah, you certainly did. You didn't see anybody like Marvin Hagler or Evander Holyfield looking at the referee when they get hit with clean body shots. That's not something we associate with legendary greatness. And you do have to look at those type of things. All the touching gloves between him and Gassiev, that was sparring session like. Now, I thought Gassiev was going to win going in. I was wrong. He he didn't come to bring
The heck? You there,
a
John?
lot of slapping.
John,
Yeah,
you there?
I thought.
All right.
Yeah, I'm here.
We lost you for a little bit there. What'd you say? I just heard you say
I just
something
thought-
about you thought Gassiev would win, and then it just kind of cut out.
We win going in. I thought that Usyk particularly looked at spectacular, even though he won the fight. No argument there. A lot of touching gloves. Usyk complaining about body shots, looking at the referee. Not a lot to me there. And there were plenty of people that thought, but
all right. We're having major difficulties, technical difficulties with your phone right now, John. You're cutting out. We can only hear every couple words.
Okay, let me try to.
All right.
Hopefully it's better now.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't impressed. Usyk clearly won the fight, but I wasn't impressed by either guy's performance. And for me, it's going to ride for me with Usyk. I got to see something at heavyweight. It's going to have to be more than beating Bellew as well. But if he shows it to me, and I'm not even saying he necessarily has to become the lineal champ, but if he proves to be a significant heavyweight and a threat, maybe we'll roll this all up. And,
all right. My point is this. If he's a significant heavyweight, he'll be the lineal champion.
That's usually the way I
yeah, well, I mean...
No, I mean, there's no significant heavyweights in the heavyweight division. If he becomes significant, he'll beat everybody that's there.
Right. Yeah, and I think you look at his skill set. I mean, I don't really buy the the amateur thing with Usyk. I mean, I understand the criticism of not finishing Gassiev, and the touching glove stuff is a bit disappointing. It always reminds me of an old Shane Mosley. I don't know what got into him. He was always a nice guy, outside the ring, but once he got older, he started being way too damn friendly with everybody. And I don't know if there was like some geographical respect there. I don't know what it was. And the complaints about the body shots, that does bother me too, because a lot of the old guys would just fight through that. But I wonder if Usyk maybe got that from Vasyl Lomachenko, because after Lomachenko got beat by Salido, I noticed that he started playing into that and trying to play to the system. But I look at Usyk's skills and I still yeah, he pity pats with punches and stuff, but it's a great way of keeping your hands home. I mean, it's rare that you find a cruiserweight who's that busy, but I just look at his skills, and I look at how wild Wilder is, and in Joshua and his stamina issues. I think Usyk's going to be, a top player at heavyweight at the very least.
I think it's interesting that Jeremiah mentions Lomachenko, because I want to say something in Lomachenko's favor there. Of course, they're both Ukrainian, and that doesn't mean you have to compare them, but they're both from the same amateur school and gym and that kind of thing. But there was a point when Lomachenko was coming up where I started to have a little bit of the reservations that I'm having now about Usyk, and I think I'd have to look back at his record. I think it might have been around the Mariaga fight, and I was saying, he should be not Mariaga. He was fighting. I can't think of the guy's name now. I'd have to look at his record, but no, it wasn't Mariaga. It was somebody earlier, and I was like, he really should be getting rid of this guy early. And he
the Asian guy?
Yeah, I'll be able to take a look. But what I want to give to his credit was I was starting to think that, his career might be a little disappointing in that sense, is that he just didn't look like he was punching with authority. And then, he started making all these guys quit. He took out, Rocky Martinez with one shot. He just took out Linares in his last fight with one shot. And to me, here's a guy who's fighting as a featherweight and a lightweight, and he's doing that. And Usyk's fighting at a division, where you would normally have more power punching, and it's Pinko who's stepping it up in the pro game and taking guys out with one punch. And I don't see that. I think I'm looking back at it now, Jeremiah, and I think it might have been that fight against that one one Asian guy, but it was somewhere along the way. I know it was before he fought Rocky Martinez, and it was one of those fights. And I said, he'd already beaten Gary Russell Jr., which that result was impressive. But in terms of entertainment value and improvement, I was saying, is this guy just going to kind of slap and go amateur, and he's going to let these overmatched guys hang around? And I felt he made a change, and I liked it. And I think that Usyk, being a bigger guy, he's got no, and it's not that these guys aren't good fighters, but he's got no knockdowns against Briedis. He's got no knockdowns against Gassiev. He let him way over the hill shot Hook go into the 10th round, and just stuff like that for a bigger guy. I think we need to see a little bit more.
All right, guys. Is there anything else we want to talk about tonight?
Nah, bro.
Good, because this is like my 5th show today, and I'm all talked out. Starting to get a headache on the left side. But all right, next week, guys, we'll have Thomas Triber on the show to talk about the Tyson Fury pinata, and the birthday pinata he's fighting. Also, Luke Jackson, Carl Frampton. We'll talk about all the fights there. We'll preview. Hopefully, there'll be something next weekend. We got to be coming up on something soon, don't we, John?
Yeah, what do we got? I haven't. Oh, but there's also for all you crazy diehards out there. I was checking. There is also fights on beIN Espanol this weekend in the U.S. and CBS Sports Network. So if you're a brutal diehard, you have even more action this weekend you can catch.
All right. So as you can tell, John has his weekend planned out.
I got to find something else to do.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up. I want to remind everybody you can hear us on Survive in Advance tomorrow at noon, or right around noon, with me and former 1981 national champion Steve Risley. He would say he's not a former national championship. He's still a national champion. But we'll be talking about the Maryland football scandal and something else. I don't even remember what it was. I just want to go to bed. So we're going to wrap this show up. I want to apologize to all the English people for the way John talked about your fighters, especially from the 70s and the 80s. He didn't really mean it, and I apologize for me and Jeremiah. I'd like to apologize to Jeremiah because we didn't really let him talk tonight. But make sure you catch us next Wednesday night with Thomas Triber on Inside Boxing Weekly. You can hear us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, John Einreinhofer, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.